All right, today we're going deep into one of the most, well, truly disturbing cases in modern criminal history. We're talking about Richard Chase, a man whose reality completely shattered, leading to a series of just horrific crimes back in the 1970s.
So, it really begs the question, right? How does a human mind completely fracture like that? That's really what's at the heart of this whole story. We're going to trace the timeline of Richard Chase's life to try and understand how his own private, terrifying delusions spiraled into this public, deadly rampage.
Now, you might think this sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but for Richard Chase, this was his absolute reality. He was totally convinced he needed to drink blood to survive, and it was that conviction, that delusion, that earned him the chilling nickname, the Vampire of Sacramento. Okay, so to really get a handle on how things got so bad, we have to go back to the beginning. The signs of Chase's severe mental illness, they didn't just pop up overnight. It was more of a slow, steady, and really tragic decline. You can see here the early 70s were really a period of rapid decline for him. Right after he graduates high school in '69, his life just starts to completely unravel. He moves out of his parents' house, and you see this increase in drug use and really erratic behavior. He can't hold down a job, he drops out of college, and then after a DUI arrest in '72, his focus it turns inward. It becomes this bizarre, obsessive preoccupation with his own physical health. And, this obsession wasn't just a case of simple hypochondria, not at all. This was the start of a really profound break from reality, and it eventually led to a diagnosis that would, well, define the rest of his tragic life. These are what are known as somatic delusions. Basically, they're completely false but very real beliefs about your own body. And Chase's they were terrifyingly specific. He was absolutely convinced that his blood was turning into powder. He believed his pulmonary artery had been stolen. He thought his head was literally changing shape, that his skull was falling apart. Can you just imagine the constant terror of truly believing your body is disintegrating from the inside out? So after his first time being institutionalized, doctors finally gave his condition a name: chronic paranoid schizophrenic. And that diagnosis, it really helps explain the completely distorted reality he was living in, a world where, in his mind, his body was under constant, invisible attack. But here's the thing. A diagnosis isn't a cure, right? After he was released, his illness didn't just come back. It mutated. It became something far, far more dangerous, and it started pushing him down this terrifying path from delusion to actual physical action. See? And his completely warped logic, he came up with a solution. If he believed his blood was disappearing, well, then the only answer was to get more, to replenish it with blood from another source. And this one single horrifying idea became his driving compulsion. And the escalation from there was just terrifyingly methodical. First, he started with animals. He would kill rabbits and consume their blood. This behavior was so alarming that it actually led to another involuntary committal. But after his final release, the escalation took a fatal turn. He bought a .22 caliber pistol, and just a few weeks later, he committed his first murder in a drive-by shooting. I mean, his breakdown was becoming dangerously public. This picture here is from Pyramid Lake in Nevada. In August of 1977, just months before that first murder, police found him just like this, half naked and covered in animal blood. It was an undeniable, absolutely terrifying warning sign of the violence that was about to be unleashed. So just 1 month after that first murder, Richard Chase's violence reached its terrifying and tragic climax. Now, this next part it's really difficult to talk about, but it's absolutely crucial to understanding the full scope of this case. This is the home of the Miroth family in Sacramento. On January 27, 1978, Richard Chase walked into this house, and what happened inside would not only shock the nation, but it would forever change the community of Sacramento. What the police found inside, it was just a complete nightmare. There were 4 victims: 36-year-old Evelyn Mareth, her little 6-year-old son, Jason, her 22-month-old nephew, David Ferreira, and a family friend, Daniel Meredith. The evidence at the scene, it pointed to mutilation, necrophilia, and cannibalism. It was clear this was a killer acting on the most extreme and violent delusions imaginable.
As you can imagine, the sheer brutality of these murders launched a massive manhunt. But it was actually the killer's disorganized nature, plus a little bit of luck, that would end up leading the police right to his door. So the FBI put together a psychological profile, and it was remarkably accurate. They predicted a disorganized, mentally ill person who lived locally. And that profile, combined with a crucial tip from a former classmate who actually recognized Chase's gaunt appearance near the crime scene, well, that gave police their prime suspect. And then the final awful piece of the puzzle fell into place. The body of 22-month-old David Ferreira was discovered in this cardboard box just in an alleyway near Chase's apartment complex. At that point, the police knew exactly who they were looking for. When the detectives finally arrested him, Chase said something just baffling. He looked around his own blood-splattered apartment and said to them, "My apartment's a lot cleaner, isn't it?" I mean, compared to the Miroth home, this one quote gives you such a chilling glimpse into his completely detached state of mind. So, with the killer in custody, the legal system faced this huge challenge. I mean, how do you even begin to prosecute a mind that is so clearly and fundamentally broken? And the trial really centered on this fundamental conflict. You had two completely different realities. On one side, you have Chase's bizarre justifications for what he did. He was claiming things like soap dish poisoning and that UFOs told him to kill via telepathy. And then on the other side, you have the clinical psychiatric explanation, chronic paranoid schizophrenia, severe delusions, and psychosis. The court had to figure out if he was legally sane enough to be held responsible for actions that were so clearly driven by this profound mental illness. In the end, the jury rejected the insanity defense. Richard Chase was found guilty on 6 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. But Chase would never actually make it to his execution. On December 26, 1980, he was found dead in his death row cell at San Quentin. He had taken his own life, hoarding his prescribed antidepressant medication for weeks before finally taking a fatal overdose. And all of this leaves us with the final haunting question. When you look at the multiple institutionalizations, the increasingly public and violent behavior, all this clear evidence of a mind in absolute freefall, could this tragedy have been prevented? You know, the case of Richard Chase, it really forces us to confront this difficult intersection of mental illness, personal liberty, and public safety. And that's a challenge that our justice and healthcare systems are still grappling with to this day.